All right, so we're going to try to do this here. I'm going to try to do a couple things, multitask today. So I know it's been a little while, but so let's go ahead and, got to turn this on, my bad. Start here again with Mark 10. Then they brought little children to him that he might touch them. But the disciples rebuked those who brought them. But when Jesus saw it, he was greatly displeased and said to them, "Let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for such is the kingdom of God. Amen. Assuredly, I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God as a little child, by no means will enter it." And he took them up in his arms, laid his hands on them, and blessed them. And I like that. You know, he tells us that we have to be like little children if we want to enter the kingdom. How many want to enter the kingdom? Do y'all want to? Yeah, obviously. So what does that mean? What does that mean to become like a little child? Trusting? Teachable, being teachable. I like that one. Believing. Okay. I like that. Kids believe that their parent is the best at whatever. What else? What other ideas? One of them that I thought of was forgiving. You know, a child is pretty forgiving. Not like some of us when we get a little older. What else? What other aspects? Okay. Okay. Okay, I like that one. That's kind of where we're headed today. I'm going to share a couple stories with y'all that have happened to me in my life and see if we can kind of see what's going on here. When we used to live in East Texas, Paris, and we had our niece and nephew used to come stay with us for the weekends, like almost every weekend. They ended up almost like our own kids and love them dearly. And they were really young. And one time they came over, I was preaching that weekend, so I couldn't go with Crystal to go pick them up. And so we've got our three, or Crystal's goes with our three and picks up two more. So now she's got 5 kids, all very young. And so here she comes into church, and we're already up front, kind of like what we were doing this morning. We're during the doxology, and we're kneeling down and we're praying, and she had 4 of them corralled. One of them got away. And it was my niece, Cheyenne. She comes coming through the back door, and she just screams at the top of her lungs, "Uncle Jim!" And we're all praying, and, it's very reverent. "Uncle Jim!" And she comes running down the aisle. And, I'm up there praying, got my eyes closed, and I hear this, and then I hear the pitter-patter of the feet running down the aisle, and I'm like, oh, man, I gotta pay attention. I don't know what she's going to do. She's going to hit me. I don't know. So she comes running down as fast as she can, runs up onto the platform, and just gives me this big hug during prayer and stays with me until the prayer was over, and then we're standing up, and I'm like, go sit down. So was that action appropriate? Really? Yes. During a reverent time of service? Yes. Child running in church? Yes. Being a disruption? Okay. All right, I like y'all. Y'all kind of getting this one. I don't know, maybe we don't need to preach a sermon today. Y'all may have it already. Okay, so another time in the islands, this was kind of fun. We were, my wife and I got to be missionaries for a few years. And second or third year that we were there, I was walking through the campus, and my art teacher was like, "Hey, Jim, come here. I need you to, sit in my class for a little bit. I got to go, make copies or something." She needed somebody to kind of sit in there and watch the kids. So I go in there and sit down and, sit with one of the kids and try to figure out what they're doing. Within seconds, this happens. Kids are like crawling all over me. And I'm like, okay. So I took a picture. It's kind of funny. But was this action appropriate? They were in class. They were supposed to be studying. Was this action appropriate? Okay, there's another kid. This kid right here was one of my favorite kids. I didn't have a favorite. You know, as a principal, you can't have a favorite child. But this was one of my favorite. You know, she was hilarious. One day, I was talking. We have at our elementary school, it was a 2-story school. The stairs were outside, and it was anyway. So I was standing halfway up the stairs talking to one of my teachers, and I promise you, my angel, her angel, I don't know whose angel it was, pushed my face just far enough that I could see her already in the air, jumping from the top of the stairs down on me. And fortunately, I saw her enough time that I could grab a hold of her and the railing, because we would have gone tumbling down the stairs. And, you know, and so that was kind of, you know, something that maybe wasn't quite appropriate. You know, here's a little kid jumping on one of the adults, the principal. You know, I thought that was kind of funny. But and this was another time where all these kids, I happened to be walking by, and you know, they're like, "Hey, Mr. Spiva," you know, and this was actually outside of our elementary school. And it was kind of cool because, you know, if you ever have a bad day, I can promise you little kids can cheer you up. And this is the way it was. You know, as I don't know about y'all, but in the mission field, sometimes, you know, people have bad days. The missionaries do have bad days. And so sometimes I would walk by and get a little cheer when half the school would be like screaming my name. You know, that kind of cheers the spirits, because I know that everyone in there loves me. And every once in a while they would come out when the teacher wasn't looking. They'd come out and give me a hug, and then I'd be like, "Go back inside, you know, you're going to get me in trouble." And but this was outside of our house. Leaving my house, we had the school playground was right there in front of my house, and most of the time leaving my house, this is what I got. You know, a kid running as fast as they could, and they wouldn't stop until they hit me. That was kind of the fun thing, was I was their break. So, you know, it got me to thinking about this verse. You know, as a little child, a lot of times little children don't know how to restrain showing love. You know, and so that got me to thinking, what would my relationship to God be like if I showed that same unrestrained love to Him? And so, you know, I started looking in the Bible, and I'm like, you know, are there stories in the Bible where Jesus is showing unrestrained love to people? Give me ideas. Reading in the Bible, has Jesus ever shown unrestrained love? Feeding people. Yeah, He did that a couple times.
Yes, He did.
With almost nothing, He produces, almost nothing to work with. He produces this massive amount of food. Okay, what else? Okay, that was my number one on my list, but I want to talk about that one a little bit later. Because that is amazing. What other stories in the Bible show Jesus showing unrestrained love? I mean, he healed so many people, like whole towns. You know, He would leave a town, and the whole town was healed. So I came up with a couple stories. First was going to be in John 5. This is one of my favorite stories right here. At the pool of Bethesda, here's a guy in John 5 that has been there for a long time. You know, the Bible says he was there for 38 years. You look in John 5:5, it says he was there for 38 years. I like this one because think about it. How old was Jesus when He came and met this man? 32, 33 maybe, somewhere in there, 31. And it took him that long to go heal this man. You know, it got me to think, maybe sometimes Jesus wants to just step in and just blow our mind personally. He doesn't want to just heal us through some other means. He wants to step in and do this personally. Verse 6, when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he'd already been in that condition for a long time, he said, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I'm coming down, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, I love this, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." And immediately the man was made well and took up his bed and walked. And that day was the Sabbath. Another one of my favorite stories. You had Mark 3. And most of our texts are going to be in the Gospels. Okay, Mark 3, and we're going to look at starting at verse 1. And he entered the synagogue again, and the man was there who had a withered hand. So they watched him closely. So who's the they in this? The Pharisees, Sadducees, priests, scribes. There's probably a whole lot of crowd there. And they watched him. Who's the him? Jesus. So there's 4 groups of people here. Okay, there's 4 groups. There's the Pharisees, there's whoever they were that were there watching Jesus, and the man with the withered hand, and a crowd of bystanders. And so they watched him, whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, that they might accuse him. And I like this. Why were they there at church that day? To accuse. Is that really what they should have been doing at church? What's church for? To worship God, not to accuse. But notice what they were doing. And I thought that was interesting. And he said to the man, Jesus talking to the man, he says, "Step forward." Then he said, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" But what happened? They kept silent. They didn't say anything. But Jesus goes on, and when he had looked around at them with anger, I like this one. A couple times we hear about Jesus being displeased. We heard about that one in the first, our first text in Mark. With the children, he was displeased, and then now he's looking around at them with anger. Why was Jesus angry? He could not break through that hard heart. And that was kind of the same way with the disciples. They didn't get it for several years. They didn't get it. And so now here he's talking with the Pharisees, and he was grieved because of the hardness of their heart. And he told the man, "Stretch out your hand," and it was restored as whole as the other. I look at these stories. Well, let's look at one more. Luke 7. Luke 7. This is one of my favorite stories, and it's hard for me to get through when I think about it, because I look at. Well, we'll talk about it in a minute. Verse 11. Luke 7, verse 11. He says, "Now it happened the day after that he went into a city called Nain, and many of his disciples went with him, and a large crowd. And when he came near the gate of the city, behold, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow." I like this, because think about it. What is going on here? Who is this woman? We don't really know, but she is a widow. She's lost her husband, and she just lost her only son. Back then it was, because a woman without a man she didn't have the same opportunities. And I like this. In verse 13, when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her and said to her, "Do not weep." Then he came and touched the open coffin. I like that, because back then, touching a coffin made you what? Made you unclean. But yet he did it anyway. He touched the coffin. And he said, young man, I say to you, arise. So the dead sat up and began to speak, and he presented him to his mother. Remember that story. We're going to hit that one again here in a little bit. I look at this, and I'm like, at these three stories, and, we talked about all his healing and everything. He could not, the Creator could not stand to see his creation suffering. A couple other texts, 1 John 3:1 says, behold, what manner of love the Father has bestowed on us, that we should be called what? The children of God. No matter what we've done to God, we've got the opportunity to come back, seek forgiveness, and it's readily available, and we can be called children again. Romans 5:8 says that God demonstrated his own love toward us in that while we were still sinners, Christ did what? Died for us. He didn't wait for us to, clean up our act and get it all together. He just did it. Matthew 20:28 says that he's going to lay down his life as a ransom for many. And this next text, kind of to go with what we were talking about a second ago. Here's Jesus. He's already been whipped. He's been beaten, had his beard pulled out. Treated horribly. Crown of thorns jammed into his head, hit on the head with a reed, all these things. As he's being nailed into a cross, he says these words. He says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Like, how can somebody love me that much? It blows my mind. And I think about this text, and who is Jesus referring to in this text? When he says, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. Who is he referring to? I think so, but I think even more. I think he was also asking for my forgiveness as well. Because if I truly knew what my sin did to God, would I do it? I don't know what I'm doing, And I like this. Here's a. I don't know if have y'all read Desire of Ages? Has everybody read Desire of Ages? I know probably most of us have, but here's a little pitch for that book today. I love Desire of Ages. Well, actually, I was getting a little bit ahead here. John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Who gave Jesus to us? God the Father. So many of us, so many people like to think, well, God, that we talk about the wrath of God. God is the mean one. If you want to be forgiven, you go to Jesus. But Jesus says we're the same. And here we read that God loved us so much that he allowed his Son to come. That whoever believes on Jesus should not perish but have everlasting life. And then verse 17, I love verse 17. He says, for God did not send his Son to the world to condemn the world. That wasn't his purpose. His purpose wasn't to come here, live a perfect life, and go, I told you it could be done, I'm out of here. He wasn't here to condemn us. His whole purpose was to save every one of us. That was his purpose. And then Desire of Ages. I love, this is a hard passage for me to get through, to think about what Jesus did for me. It says, Christ was treated as we deserve, that I might be treated as he deserves. He was condemned for my sin, in which he had no share, that I might be justified by his righteousness, in which I have no share. I love that. I love that. He suffered a death. That was my death that he suffered, that I might receive the life which was his. And then I love, Isaiah. With his stripes we're healed. It's through him we're healed. By his life and death, Christ has achieved even more than recovery from the ruin wrought through sin. I like this part right here. Listen to this part. It was Satan's purpose to bring about an eternal separation between God and man. That was the devil's whole purpose, was to get a separation between us that we couldn't be brought back together. But through Christ, I love this, what happens? We're even closer to God than if we had never fallen. because of what Christ did for us, we can be even closer. I'm blown away by that, by how much Jesus and God loved us to allow for this, to do this one. So biblical examples, think of the stories in the Bible. How many times do you see unrestrained love shown to Jesus? Okay, alabaster box. Children, you know what? I didn't ever think about that one. Children did show unrestrained love, didn't they? Okay, that's a good one. Okay, so now I'm up to 3. I've got three stories now where people showed unrestrained love to God, or to Jesus. So hopefully y'all can come up with more.
Mary and Martha at Lazarus' death.
Okay.
They talked to Jesus and said, if you'd have just come a little earlier, he wouldn't have died.
Yeah, but they were looking for something for them. They were looking for Lazarus. They wanted Lazarus back.
Yes, but he wasn't.
And those 3 are ones that I really liked. Was Lazarus, Martha, and Mary. Matthew 26:6 says, when Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, I like this one. How many people got to hang out with the leper? Nobody hung out with the leper. Nobody went to a leper's house. So this obviously means that Simon had been healed. And there's a lot of discussion that maybe Jesus was the one that healed him. But this woman comes in, has an alabaster flask of costly oil. She pours it on his head, and when his disciples saw it, they were pretty upset. And this is Christ Triumphant. If y'all are looking for a good devotional, I love Christ Triumphant. It's a really, really good one. It says, Jesus, the world's Redeemer, is drawing close to the time when he will give his life for a sinful world. Yet how little did even his disciples realize what they were about to lose. Mary couldn't even think about this. Her heart was just so full of love for her Savior. You know, the sentiment of her heart was, what shall I render to the Lord for all his benefits towards me? This ointment, costly as it was esteemed by the disciples, was but a poor expression of her love for her master. But Christ could appreciate the gift as an expression of her love, and Mary's heart was filled with perfect peace and happiness. Mary, by the Holy Spirit's power, saw in Jesus one who had come to seek and save the souls that were ready to perish. And I love this part right here. Every one of the disciples should have had that same devotion. They should have, because they were all sinners. Wow, blows my mind. And then here's the third one that I came up with. And I like this. This is found in John. Here's Jesus. He's on the cross, moments away from dying. He's right there. And we go to verse 26. Verse 26 tells us that, verse 25 tells us there's only a few people at his feet. There's only a few people. And then verse 26, when Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing by, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Oh, I love this one. Verse 27, then he said to John, the disciple that was there, he looks at John and he goes, "John, I'm done. I need a favor. I need a favor. And the biggest favor anybody could give me right now is take care of my mother." I love that. And look at John's response. Right away. He didn't even question. He didn't say, well, let me think about that. Wow, that's another mouth to feed. That's another person to take care of. Immediately, John took her home and treated her just like his own mother. Blows my mind. So, it kind of makes me think of, why that woman at Nain was so important to him. Because he knew his mother was going to be going through that very same thing just a short time later. And I kind of look at that whole thing as a representation of what he just went through, or what he's going through right now. She just lost her, she obviously had lost her husband at some point. Now she just lost her only son. But yet, that son in Nain was resurrected, giving mom hope again. Was that a representation of what he was going to do? Because he resurrected and brought hope to his mother again. But I want to make this a little personal. Has God or Jesus shown you just personally shown you unrestrained love? And I know we go to the John 3:16. We go to him dying on the cross. But beyond that, has God stepped into your life and shown you something just blown your mind? Some of the things I was thinking about was, my job, my children, my spouse, my friends, my house. All these things are a blessing that I don't deserve. My wife and I have, mostly my wife, have started gardening. We've got a lot of flowers. We've got several trees and, all this stuff. And, I look at that stuff, and I love sitting out on my patio and looking at all these things that God has blessed me with. But I want to go back to our original question. What would our relationship to God be like? What would that look like if I showed unrestrained love to him? You look at what's the greatest commandment. What was the greatest commandment? Was love God with everything you've got. Show him unrestrained love. That was what, when Jesus was asked that question, that's how he responded. Show him, show love to him. And so I got to thinking, I was like, well, what does that even mean? What does unrestrained love to God look like? So it got me to thinking. Well, in Isaiah 58, tells us some really cool stuff. It says, "Is this not the fast that I have chosen?" And this is God talking. This isn't Isaiah talking. This is God talking to Isaiah, through Isaiah, to us. He says, "Is this not the fast that I have chosen? To loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke." I like that one. But then, we go to verse 7. "Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and that you bring to your house the poor who are cast out? When you see the naked, that you cover him." I like that, because is there a ministry in our church that reflects this right here? What ministry in our church reflects Isaiah 58:7? Community services. That's the whole purpose of community services, is right here. To take food to those that are hungry. To take clothes to those that don't have any. I love this. But then we go on to verse 8. And, I've actually got verse 8 through 11, but I think let's assign that as homework this afternoon to read the rest of that. Because I want to go to James 1:27. I like this verse right here. It's not going to be on the screen, so you're going to have to go old school on this one and look it up. James 1:27 really sums up to me what unrestrained love to God looks like, because it starts out with pure and undefiled religion before God the Father is this. So I'm thinking, okay, pure and undefiled religion, that's what I want. But what does it tell us to do? It says to visit the orphans and widows in their trouble. Take care of those around us. If you see somebody that maybe is struggling, take care of them. Visit those that are less fortunate and keep oneself unspotted from the world. Matthew 25, again, here's Jesus. Matthew 25, verse 33 says, "And he will set the sheep on his right hand and the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, 'Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world.'" Why? Why are these people being led into the kingdom? He says, "For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me." like that. And he says, Lord, verses 37 through 39 says, when did we do all these things? I don't even know what you're talking about here. And he says, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to the least of these, you did it for me. And I like that because, and it doesn't always have to be, so let's flip back to verse 35 here. It doesn't have to be physical. It can be. It can be physical. Sometimes people are really hungry and they really need a sandwich or they really need something, and that is their most basic need right then and then. You need that. I get that. But if I look at this, maybe some of us are too busy. Some of us have busy lifestyles, and we don't have time to go take care of anybody else. But, that's okay. Because here, guess what? You can put this in a spiritual sense. Spiritual food, spiritual water, spiritually clothe somebody, prayer. Sometimes people just need a hug. Sometimes people just need a shoulder to cry on. I look at John 11. This is really cool. This is, to me, maybe this is for those of us that are a little more busy. Here's how we can show extravagant love to God. This is, Lazarus is just being resurrected. John 11:43 says, now when he had said all these things, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he who had died came out, bound hand and foot with grave clothes. And his face was wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to him to do what? Loose him. Loose him. Let him go. Sometimes we have people in our life, they just need to be loosed from whatever it is that is tying them down. All they need is a kind word, a smile. How hard is it to give a smile to someone? A comforting hug. These are easy things that even busy people can do. Prayer. Hopefully you're spending time in prayer even how busy you are. You can pray for people, pray with people. Revelation 12. I like this one. Revelation 12. We're going to go to verse 11, and it may be on the screen, but Revelation 12:11 says, they overcame him with the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to death. So they loved God more than anything, even their own life. They loved God with everything that they had. And what else? There was three things that these people needed at the end times when they overcame Satan. They needed three things. The blood of the Lamb, which thankfully it's already been done. That's already taken care of, so that you can check that off your list. Loving God with everything that you've got. And then how's your testimony? Those are the three things that we need. So I look at that and I go, how is my testimony? Can I say that I have shown unrestrained love to God? And we're going to go to 1 Corinthians. And I know y'all know this one, but we're still going to go there. 1 Corinthians 13. It says, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy, understand all these things, have all knowledge, all this, I can remove a mountain. I can move a mountain from here over there. But if I don't have love, nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, that's what we were just talking about, that's what we should be doing, right? But and I could be a martyr. I give my body to be burned. But if I don't have love, it's nothing. It's nothing. Meant nothing. Love suffers long. Love is kind, does not envy, does not parade itself, isn't puffed up, doesn't behave rudely, doesn't seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, doesn't rejoice in iniquity, bears all things, believes all things, rejoices in truth. I forgot that one, sorry. Hopes all things, endures all things. And I love verse 8. Never fails. Love never fails. And we're going to skip a few verses here that are some of my favorite verses in the Bible, but we're going to go down to 13. And now abide faith, hope, love, these three, but the greatest of these is what? And I look at that, and I know we're not supposed to add things to the Bible, but I think I want to put in there completely unrestrained love. But is it really love if it isn't completely unrestrained? I mean, if you hesitate in your love, is it love? So my challenge to you this week, love God recklessly. Love Him with complete unrestraint. What's your benefit? You know, when we want to do something different in our life, it's good to focus on a benefit, right? Isaiah 58. That's your assignment this afternoon. Okay? Read Isaiah 58. That is your benefit. And you're going to see some awesome stuff that God has promised. If you do the things that I've asked, if you love me without restraint, read Isaiah 58.